Everyone has gone through a life event that's also become a financial transition. I'll bet that some of the changes you've already weathered in your life are playing in your head. Maybe it was something positive like a marriage, adding children, an exciting career move, or the big one, retirement. Or it could have been something a little bit more unexpected, like the loss of a spouse, a divorce, or a major illness. The reality is that you will have many transitions over your life, and you get the decision to be proactive and handle them with ease, or potentially have long-term repercussions that make it hard to take back control of your finances. My name is Amber Knips, and I'm a wealth advisor at Sweet Financial Partners located in Fairmont and Jackson, Minnesota. And I specialize in working with high net worth individuals as they navigate life's biggest transitions, both expected and unexpected. We believe everyone has the right to realize that their dreams are possible, and we use this as a focus when we're working through every situation with clients and helping them plan for the future. I meet with a lot of people at a lot of different stages and transitions, but there's one that sticks with me, and I think about it often. She had unexpectedly lost her husband and was left feeling completely lost. They had a great system that he took care of the finances and loved watching all the investments. He went to the meetings with their advisor. She said, I'll go someday. But unfortunately, someday never happened. And she had no idea where everything was, and she did not have a handle on things. She was completely overwhelmed with making decisions. So she decided to make them as quick as possible just to get them over with. She paid off all of her debt with all of the liquid investments. So she was left with no debt, which felt great, but she had nothing to cover the day-to-day expenses. So she was forced to liquidate IRA accounts, pay a penalty, and it was a snowball effect that would have been a normal, comfortable plan for them, turned into her having to go back to work and drastically changing her goals. Had they done a little bit of coordinating ahead of time when things were going really, really well, things could have been so different for her. I hear all the time, but that will never happen to me. And I certainly hope that's the case, but the likelihood that something will happen at some point, unfortunately, is really high. So the big question is, how do you prepare your finances for a transition? You don't want to be put into that situation in the middle of a big life change and being forced to be reactive to try and take back control. There's always a financial impact. There's no doubt about it. Transitions cost money. So the first big question is, how much will your transition cost? And unfortunately, there's no magic formula for the cost that each transition brings, but having an understanding of what the implications could be for each type of transition could be really helpful. So for example, if you were to lose a spouse, would you need to take time off work to get your bearings and take care of your family? Would there be loss of income because now you're out of work and your spouse is out of work? Do you have to drastically change your lifestyle? And by now you're probably thinking, well, Amber, I've saved up a nice chunk in my savings account, so I've done my part to be prepared, right? Well, not necessarily. I believe in planning for transitions happens two ways, and having an emergency fund is really, really important. But there's also a whole bunch of other types of things that you need to do as well. And the difference between your transition fund and your emergency savings fund is really the intentions regarding their use. Your financial transition fund is all about pre-planning for the expected or unexpected life events. These are basically to help bridge the gap in that time that you would need, so you don't have to make those quick financial decisions to derail your overall plan. So once you deplete your transition fund, then you dip into your emergency savings. And that's really a last resort. I like to think of your emergency savings fund as things that can come up day to day. So that clunking noise in your car that you're thinking, oh, I really should get that fixed, or your refrigerator goes out. And another thing to consider too is reviewing your life insurance. And that can make a big difference when it comes to cost of transition. So reviewing that every few years, especially as you have major life transitions and changes, if you have young children or a lot of debt, or maybe there's a significant earnings gap between you and your spouse, it could make sense to review and make sure that you're carrying adequate life insurance and adding some more policies. While it's important to prepare for potential transitions, there's always going to be something or an additional cost that you didn't fully anticipate. Life happens. And you'll never be like, gosh, I way over planned for that. I have way too much savings in my transition fund. Because the great thing is, if you don't need the funds or the full amount that you've saved, you can do something fun and something different with them down the road. So it can serve as a dual purpose. So there isn't a risk of overfunding. So I have often heard, I wish I would have done more, or if I would have known, I would have done a lot more. So over planning is definitely something better to consider moving forward. And just because a lot of the time financial implications of transitions get a bad name because they can be negative, I do want to be clear that not all transitions are bad. Maybe you have a job change and now you have an increase in pay, which is positive. So now you can look at saying, let's look at future things that could happen down the road, and I can be even more prepared for those, as well as considering the opportunities that can bring. So maybe it's more wiggle room now because of that additional pay to do things that you didn't have the ability to do before, or the ability to save more for retirement, which you didn't have the ability to do before either. So any extra funds that you can be putting away now is only creating more stability and possibilities down the road, which is a great lead into the next way to prepare for a transition is to prepare your finances. Are your priorities straight? Do you understand what is the most important to you? If we were sitting here 1 year from today, 3 years from today, what would you have wanted to accomplish? And are you doing things every day to get closer to that point? So when you understand your priorities in general, you can make better decisions and you can make them faster. So when you use your priorities as a compass, you'll go in the right direction, and that will help take some of that stress away. However, life can change, and anytime, preparing your finances is a way to take control of some of those different transitions. So what pre-planning does is it gives you the ability to take into account the things you can control and leave some wiggle room for the things that you can't control. What I often find is that everyone has their own system for paying bills, staying organized, which is great. And, I'm guilty of getting the mail, throwing it on the counter. Things get messy, the counter, everything gets picked up, put in the drawer. You know what drawer I'm talking about. It's next to the flashlight, the birthday candles, maybe that old birthday card. Eventually that drawer gets so full, it gets cleaned out, and maybe it gets thrown in a box for filing later. Well, that system might make sense to you, and it makes sense to me, but you know who it doesn't make sense to? Your kids or your spouse. So for them, it might feel like a complete disaster. So you think of if something unexpected happens to you and now they're in charge of paying the bills or finding out where all of your accounts are or your life insurance. Are they going to know to find that box in the basement that's filing, or are they going to know that junk drawer? That's where all the things are. Would they have a mess ahead of them that instead they have to wait every day for the mail to come because they don't know where things are at? The last thing you want someone to be saying is, gosh, Dad, he was so great, but man, he left us a mess. So luckily, this is a really easy fix. Is keeping a file or a spreadsheet, writing out at the very least all of your bills and all of the due dates. So which ones are auto pay, which ones you have to pay. Because then if someone needs to step in and pause or cancel something that's set up, it's really easy to know who to contact, what account it comes from. And another important thing is, with that, make a list of all your financial accounts and who to contact. We have gone through that with way too many new clients trying to unwind quite the web because the spouse or kids have no idea where the accounts were. And it can be really frustrating and really time consuming for the people who are most important to you, which is why it can make sense to consolidate as well, consolidating as much as possible. So it's just one contact versus several 1-800 numbers, long hold times, extra paperwork. And what we often recommend and do with our clients is we have family meetings to talk through everything and go through your wishes. And this can be going into as much or as little detail as possible. We can certainly keep it high level so you're not saying all your balances and all of the things, but it creates that comfort and that connection. And it makes it a lot easier to make sure that your wishes are communicated to your heirs. And the next way to prepare yourself is through financial education. So, how is your financial knowledge? If you take the time to increase your financial knowledge, you won't be sorry. The more education that you can give yourself is just increasing your chances of success later on. So now hold off on all the eye rolls and the scrunches, because I don't mean you need to be a day trader and love watching the markets, but I do mean having an understanding of the strategy that you've put in place, because your advisor is there to take care of all of the in between. All you need to know is how, your overall plan of getting from A to B and some of the in between. So maybe it's A to D and working through that. So we're here to take care of the logistics, the things you don't want to dive deep into, but having some understanding of financial education will help you understand better what your goals are and the steps to get there. So remember that educated decisions can't happen if you're living in a state of denial. So it's important to know that at some point, some sort of transition will come up. It's just a matter of whether it's planned or not and the different challenges that come with it. And that's why it's great to go through our dream architect process. It can help give you the comfort of showing, well, what would happen in different potential scenarios. And it takes something really, really complicated and makes it intuitive. So you can see the different impacts relatively quickly and help, work through those gaps to see, is there anything you should be doing different or to be proactive on instead of reactive? So the last important consideration to prepare your finances for a transition is learning to pivot. So do you leave room in your life to pivot? And what I mean by that is that every minute doesn't need to be scheduled, which I'm guilty of because I like to have things planned and prepared. But did you build up in your head expectations of how something should go? And are you setting yourself up for disappointment if it doesn't happen exactly as planned? Or if something unexpected happened, does it really turn you into a spin and throw off an entire situation because it was not how it was supposed to go? So as much as we'd like to, we can't control certain events in our lives. So being able to understand and know that certain situations are going to go differently. And there's a really great quote that I love to keep in the back of my mind is that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. So knowing that a potential transition doesn't mean that it's the end of everything and the end of all the goals that you had in mind. It just potentially means a little bit of a change on your path to get there, which is why I strongly recommend you check out my video, Preparing for Life's What Ifs, because a lot can happen during transition. And in that video, I go through specific action items, how to better prepare for the unexpected and expected.